They dumped snow on my yard for 3 winters straight, so I took away 12 of their parking spaces without asking. Not by yelling, not by calling the cops. I did it with a fence, a survey line, and a whole lot of patience that finally ran out. And the wild part is, none of this started as a fight. It started as me trying to be a decent neighbor. I live just outside a mid-sized town, the kind of place where nothing really changes unless someone builds a new strip mall, which is exactly what happened about 15 years ago behind my property. When I bought the house, that shopping plaza was already there. A grocery store, a nail salon, a dry cleaner, the usual lineup. It wasn't pretty, but it was quiet enough. The back edge of their parking lot ran along the far end of my yard, separated by what I assumed was a clean, obvious boundary. Grass on my side, asphalt on theirs. Simple. The first time it happened, I didn't think twice about it. It had snowed overnight. One of those heavy, wet storms that make everything look peaceful until you actually have to deal with it. I walked out back with my coffee, still half asleep, and noticed a small pile of snow pushed up near the edge of my lawn. Maybe 3 feet high, a few feet wide. It looked out of place, sure, but not malicious. I figured the plow driver just misjudged the line. New guy, early morning, low visibility, it happens. So I let it go. A week later, it happened again. Bigger pile this time. And then again after the next storm. Same spot, same pattern. Their entire parking lot would get cleared, and all that snow, every last bit of it, ended up pushed right onto my property like I was some kind of overflow zone. By January, my backyard didn't look like a yard anymore. It looked like the aftermath of a snowstorm mixed with a landfill. The piles got higher, wider, dirtier. Not just snow either. Salt, gravel, trash, stuff that had no business being there. I remember one morning spotting a single sneaker sticking out of the ice like some weird frozen artifact. Cigarette butts, broken plastic, coffee cups. It was all packed into this gray, crusty mound that just sat there, slowly killing the grass underneath. And here's the thing. I still tried to be reasonable. I told myself, don't escalate. Don't be that guy. So I called the property management office for the plaza. Took me 3 transfers before I got someone who sounded like they actually knew what was going on. His name was Carl. Calm voice, a little distracted, like I wasn't the only problem on his list. Hey, just wanted to let you know, I said, trying to keep it light. Your snow removal crew's been pushing everything onto my yard. Might be a boundary issue. He paused for a second, then gave me that standard line. Yeah, I'll look into it. And I believed him. That was my first mistake. Nothing changed. Next snowfall, same thing. Maybe worse. At that point I called again, a little less friendly this time. Carl picked up, recognized my name, and this time he sounded more defensive. Look, he said, the plow company's under contract. They're doing what they're supposed to do. On my land. I asked. They're following the property lines as far as I know. Well then they're wrong, I said. Because that's my yard. There was a pause, and then he shifted the responsibility like it was nothing. You'll have to take that up with the plow company. I remember standing there in my kitchen, phone still in my hand, just staring out the window at that growing pile of dirty snow. Thinking, are you serious right now? But fine. If that's how they wanted to play it, I'd play along. So I tracked down the plow company. Small outfit, local guys. I explained the situation, tried to keep it civil. Their response, we're clearing within the designated boundaries. You're not, I said. You're dumping onto my property. And then the guy on the other end just goes, flat as anything. Prove it. No apology. No hesitation. Just prove it. That was the moment something shifted for me. Up until then, I'd been operating under the assumption that this was a misunderstanding. A mistake. Something that could be fixed with a couple of phone calls and a little cooperation. But that one sentence, it told me everything I needed to know. They weren't guessing. They weren't confused. They just didn't care. And once I realized that, I stopped trying to be accommodating. I didn't argue with him, didn't raise my voice. I just said, all right, I will, and hung up. That same afternoon, I called a surveyor. Now, I'll be honest, spending $800 just to prove a point didn't feel great. It felt excessive, petty even. I remember pacing around my living room that night, wondering if I was overreacting. If I should just let it go, deal with the mess, reseed the lawn in the spring, and move on like a normal person. But every time I looked out back, I saw that pile. That gray, filthy reminder that someone else had decided my property was their dumping ground and expected me to just accept it. So I went through with it. A week later, the surveyor showed up. Older guy, quiet, methodical. Took his time measuring everything, placing markers, checking records. I watched from a distance, hands in my pockets, trying not to get my hopes up. A couple days after that, he came back with the results. And that's when this whole situation stopped being about snow and turned into something a lot bigger. When the surveyor handed me the paperwork, he didn't say much at first, just kind of tapped the page with his pen and looked at me like he'd seen this sort of thing before. I remember taking the folder, flipping it open right there on the hood of his truck, expecting to confirm what I already believed, that they were crossing the line by a couple feet, maybe a little more, something annoying, but manageable. It wasn't a couple feet. It was 6 full feet of their parking lot sitting on my property, not just in one spot either, but running along the entire back edge like a quiet, invisible theft that had been happening for over a decade. The dumpsters? Mine. The loading area? Mine. About a dozen parking spaces? All mine. According to the official survey, legally, clean as day, it had always been mine. I actually laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I didn't know what else to do. All that time I'd been worrying about snow, and it turns out they'd been living on my land. How long's this been like that? I asked. The surveyor shrugged. Based on the records? Looks like about 15 years. 15 years. Which meant this started before I even bought the place. The previous owner either didn't notice, or didn't care, or maybe just didn't want the hassle. But me? I was already $800 deep and staring at a situation that had just changed completely. This wasn't about a plow driver anymore. This was leverage. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the survey spread out in front of me, just thinking. Not angry, not yet. More like focused. For the first time since this whole thing started, I had clarity. They weren't just crossing a line, they had built over it, relied on it, made money off it, and they told me to prove it. So I did. The next morning, I made copies of everything and sent a formal notice to the property ownership group, the actual company that owned the shopping plaza. Not Carl, not the plow guys, the people at the top. I kept it simple. Attached the survey, highlighted the encroachment, and gave them 30 days to remove anything sitting on my land. No threats, no attitude, just facts. About a week later, I got a response, not from them directly, but from their lawyer. And that's when things got a little more interesting. The letter was polite, but you could feel the edge in it. They acknowledged the survey, acknowledged the overlap, and then immediately pivoted to something called adverse possession. Basically, their argument was this. They had been using that portion of land openly, continuously, and without interruption for so long that it legally belonged to them now. I read that part twice, then a third time, because on paper, it almost sounded convincing. But something about it didn't sit right with me. So I did what they did. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Dana Mercer. Sharp, no nonsense, the kind of person who doesn't waste words. I brought her everything. The survey, the letters, my notes about the snow, all of it. She skimmed through it, asked a few questions, then leaned back in her chair like she was putting pieces together. Did the previous owner ever interact with them? She asked. I don't know, I said. Why? Because adverse possession falls apart if there was permission, she said. Even informal. That one sentence, that was the crack. I started digging. It took a couple days, a few phone calls, and one very helpful conversation with the daughter of the previous owner. She was handling some leftover estate paperwork and still had boxes of old documents. Buried in there, handwritten notes, dated around 12 years back. Nothing fancy, just a record of a conversation where the shopping plaza had asked for temporary use of that strip of land during a renovation project, and the owner had agreed. Temporary. That word mattered more than anything else in that moment, because it meant their use of the land was never hostile, never without permission, which meant their entire legal argument. Dead. I remember sitting in Dana's office while she read through those notes, and for the first time since this started, she smiled. Well, she said, tapping the page, that changes everything. Her next letter was different. Still professional, still clean, but there was weight behind it now. She laid out the facts, dismantled their claim piece by piece, and ended it with a clear deadline. 14 days. Remove all structures, cease all use of the encroached land, or face legal action, including damages and daily penalties. No ambiguity, no room to wiggle. And just like that, the balance shifted. A few days later, I got a call. Not from Carl this time. Someone higher up. His name was Victor Hale. You could hear it in his voice, controlled, calculated, the kind of guy who doesn't call unless something matters. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be, he said. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sit for a second. Feels like it already is. He exhaled, just slightly. We're willing to discuss purchasing that strip of land from you. Fair market value. There it was. I asked him what fair meant. The number he gave me? Honestly, it was low. Not insultingly low, but low enough that it told me exactly how they saw this situation. Like it was a minor inconvenience they could just pay away. I'm not interested, I said. There was a pause. We can revisit the number. I'm sure you can, I replied. Still not interested. And that was the truth. Because at that point, it wasn't about money. Not yet. It was about the fact that they had ignored me, dismissed me, told me to prove something, and now that I had, they wanted to quietly fix it on their terms. No. A couple days later, they came back with a higher offer. Better, but still not enough to make me feel like they actually understood the position they were in. So I said no again. And then, everything went quiet. For a while at least. Winter started to loosen its grip, the snow began to melt, and for the first time in months, I could actually see my yard again, or what was left of it. The grass was dead, flattened, torn up by the weight of all that snow and debris. Deep ruts where the piles had sat. It looked exhausted. And standing there, looking at it, I realized something. I had spent months reacting, calling, waiting, explaining, proving, all of it on their timeline. And I was done with that. If they weren't going to move, I would. That afternoon, I called a fencing company. Told them I wanted a chain link fence installed exactly on the surveyed property line. No guesswork, no compromise. I even walked the line with them personally, showed them the markers, made sure there was zero room for interpretation. The guy gave me a look halfway through, like he understood what this was really about. You sure you want it right here? He asked. I nodded. Exactly right there. He smiled a little. All right then. Installation took 2 days. And the moment it went up, everything changed. 12 parking spaces gone. Their dumpster? Completely boxed in, no access from the lot. Half their loading zone? Useless. It was like I had flipped a switch. And I hadn't even made a single phone call. I was standing in my kitchen, watching it all from the window, when my phone rang. I already knew who it was before I picked up. I didn't even have to check the caller ID. I knew it was them. There's a certain kind of timing you start to recognize when people suddenly realize they've lost control of a situation they thought they owned. I let it ring twice, maybe 3 times, just long enough to make a point. Then I picked up. Yeah, it was Carl. But not the same Carl from before, not the distracted, pass-it-along version. This one came in hot, voice tight, already halfway into a complaint before I could even say anything else. What the hell did you do? He snapped. I turned slightly, looking out the window at the fence stretching clean and straight along the back edge of my yard, sunlight catching the metal just enough to make it stand out. I put up a fence, I said. Calm. Simple. You can't just block off access like that, he shot back. We have deliveries, tenants, customers. You mean on my property? I cut in, still not raising my voice. That stopped him, just for a second. Then he pivoted, like I knew he would. This is completely unreasonable. We were trying to work something out. I almost laughed at that, not out loud, but you know that feeling when something is so backwards it just kind of hits you sideways. Carl, I said, you told me to call the plow company. That's not. And they told me to prove it. Silence again. Short, but heavy. You don't get to ignore me for months, I continued, and then call me unreasonable when I finally act. His tone shifted, not softer exactly, but less certain. You're hurting businesses here. I leaned against the counter, letting that hang for a second. No, I said. You did that when you decided my yard was your dumping ground. There was nothing after that. No comeback, no apology, just a sharp exhale, and then the line went dead. And just like that, Carl was out of the picture. 2 days went by without a word. No calls, no emails, nothing. Which, honestly, was the loudest response they could have given. It meant they were regrouping, figuring out what their next move was now that the easy options were gone. Then, on the 3rd day, my phone rang again. Different number. Different energy. Hi, is this Mark Ellison? She asked. Yeah. My name is Rebecca Sloan. I'm calling on behalf of the property ownership group. Right away, I could tell this was not Carl. Her voice was steady, measured, the kind of calm that doesn't come from ignoring problems, it comes from solving them. I understand there's been an ongoing issue regarding the property line, she said. That's one way to put it, I replied. And I also understand, she continued, that we haven't handled this as well as we should have. That got my attention, not because it fixed anything, but because it was the first time anyone on their side had actually acknowledged reality without trying to spin it. She didn't rush, didn't defend. She just laid it out. They had reviewed the survey, reviewed the documentation, spoken with their legal team, and they knew exactly where things stood now. We'd like to resolve this properly, she said. Define properly, I said. There was a small pause, like she was choosing her words carefully. First, we'll cover the full restoration of your lawn. Not just surface repair, full remediation, soil treatment, regrading, new grass, irrigation if needed. I glanced out the window again, at the damage that was finally visible now that the snow was gone. Okay, I said. What else? We'd also like to compensate you for the use of your land and discuss a temporary easement agreement, if you're open to that. There it was. Different wording, same core idea. What's the number? I asked. $15,000, she said. I didn't even hesitate. No, she didn't react. No surprise, no pushback, just a quiet acknowledgement. All right, she said. What would you consider reasonable? Now that was new. No pressure, no assumption, just a question. And I'll be honest, I didn't answer right away, because this was the first moment in the entire situation where I actually had to think about what I wanted, not just what I didn't want. I'll get back to you, I said. That night, I sat out back for a while. No snow, no noise, just the fence line, clean and undeniable. And I thought about everything that had led up to that point. The calls, the dismissal, the prove it, the months of being treated like I didn't matter because it was easier for them. And now, suddenly, I did. So the question wasn't just about money. It was about terms. The next morning, I called her back. 50, I said. There was a brief pause on the line. Not shock, more like recalibration. For a permanent sale? She asked. No, I said. 10-year easement. You use the space, but it's still mine. And when the 10 years are up, we revisit. She didn't respond immediately, and for a second I wondered if I'd pushed too far. Then she said, let me take that back to the team. A week later, we had an agreement. $50,000 for a 10-year easement. Full lawn restoration, and they didn't cut corners. They brought in professionals, redid the soil, installed a proper irrigation system, even planted a line of hedges along the fence for privacy. Covered every legal fee, every survey cost, everything. And maybe the most important part, they replaced the plow company. New contract, strict clause, no dumping, no exceptions. Once everything was signed, I had the fence adjusted back 6 feet, right to the edge of the easement. The parking spaces came back. The dumpster was accessible again. The loading zone worked. From the outside, it looked like everything went back to normal. But it wasn't the same, because now there was a line, not just in the ground, but in how things worked. They knew exactly where it was. And so did I. Every now and then, I still think about how close I came to just letting it go, writing it off as one of those things you don't fight because it's easier not to. And honestly, if they had handled it differently in the beginning, if someone had just taken responsibility, fixed the snow issue, shown a little respect, none of this would have happened. No survey, no fence, no $50,000 lesson, just a quiet yard and a neighbor who never made a story out of it. But they didn't. And that's the part one keep coming back to. Because this whole thing, it wasn't really about snow or even land. It was about what happens when people assume you won't push back, when they mistake patience for permission. So I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have taken the first offer and walked away? Or would you have pushed it as far as it could go? Let me know in the comments.